Skipster is the guest management platform used by top event teams for everything from guest lists to seating charts and online invitations. If you're looking for next-generation event software that helps deliver perfect guest experiences, head over to Skipster's website. It's Skipster, ZKIPSTER.com to try a free event.
Are you a follower?
9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna call the ad.
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Hi, David.
Hey, Beth, here we are, another edition of GatherGeeks.
This episode, our guest is Simon Miller, who is the president of Brand Activation Services and Simon Elliot Events based in Long Island. Brand Activation Services does just what it sounds. It creates and fabricates activations at corporate events. And Simon's story is that he got started with social events, and by observing how people interacted, what they gravitated toward, and what the kids were into, he figured out how to export and extrapolate that into the corporate sphere, which is why we were interested.
And it's kind of magical. It's really amazing how there's not a lot of difference between the social and the corporate. People want the same things at the end of the day. And it's right. It is true that he was able to go and explore in the social realm as his laboratory.
And people who have been to BizBash Live have seen his work. It's often one of the busiest places on our exhibit floor. And this being GatherGeeks, we're going to talk about the world of activations in this episode, really pick apart their role at events and how that's changed to what's trending, what your guests want from activations, and what questions planners need to answer so that they get an effective experience for their guests. Let's listen.
So, Simon, I've noticed that what you do is kind of the sweet spot in what's going on at events today.
Sure.
You do activations, but it's much more than activations. You're providing I always say that it's that Maya Angelou feeling that people don't remember what you said. They remember what you made them feel like at the moment.
For sure.
So tell us about what's going on today, and then we're going to go back and learn about your history and things like that.
I think what we're seeing today is that the brands that we work with are really looking to create a feeling for the attendees at their events. They're looking to connect with them in a new way.
So the Maya Angelou connection actually makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense. There's really a push towards an organic sense of connection. And that could be anything from a branded takeaway that people can collaborate in producing that, or some type of a really fun, immersive photo op. But it's about, really finding just a new way to connect with people.
So people understand what you do. Give us a picture of some of the coolest things that you've done in the last 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
Explain what you do, because I don't even know if your mother understands what you do, probably.
That's so fun. Yeah, for sure. Really what we do is we combine a whole bunch of different elements of production, whether it be graphics and fabrication, building structures and environments, as well as a lot of technology, photographic imaging, recording technology, video. We take all of these different elements and really find interesting ways to combine them and to create kind of a uniform, really immersive space that people can interact with. So that could be anything from working with a media company to create a new spin on the upfronts, versus having people in a captive audience where they're sitting in a theater watching a show. It's teaching them about what it feels like to potentially be one of the characters in those shows. So we've really kind of flipped the script on the way to present an upfront, and now it's
Explain what an upfront is to those who don't know what an upfront is.
Sure. The upfront season is essentially an opportunity for some of the big media brands to connect with media buyers and let them know what's going to be coming up for their upcoming season of shows.
And they're trying to sell advertising mostly.
Exactly, yeah. So they're basically looking to unload a lot of that inventory up front. And that's why, it's called the upfronts. Basically, it's an upfront opportunity to buy a lot of that ad inventory. And in the past, it's been about doing a big stage production. CEO of the company comes out and talks about what's going on, bringing out characters from, actors from the shows. And it's a very kind of one-sided experience where people are watching it as though they were watching a movie in a theater. So over the past couple of years, we've now had the opportunity to work with some of our clients, like a Univision, for instance, and help them create a new way to present that content. And it's been through creating these immersive experiences.
So walk us through a couple of these immersive experiences in detail so that you get what that journey is. Because you were talking about the attendee journey is actually through these experiences.
Definitely. Really fun. Last year at Univision's Upfront, we took a show called La Piloto, and it was an interesting telenovela about drug trafficking and planes and just that whole dramatic experience. And what we did was we brought a real flight simulator into the Upfront space. And we actually connected with a flight school and brought in a real authentic flight simulator that people would use to get their pilot's license. So now in learning about this show, you would step into the cockpit of this flight simulator and be panoramic, surrounded by screens, and actually take control of the plane, and you're making a flight between South America and Los Angeles or whatever it was. So the actor from the show would come on and basically ask you to be their co-pilot for the next few minutes, and you would take the controls and fly the plane.
And so you had a lot of those. I was at that Upfront.
Yes.
What were some of the other things that would illustrate what you do?
Definitely.
To your mother.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously for Univision, sports is a big deal, especially in the soccer market. So rather than just kind of walking through a museum of looking at trophies and jerseys and things like that, we really wanted to give you a sense of what it felt like to be a soccer player, to be on the field, to feel the excitement of that. So that had everything to do with creating a soccer kick experience where you were actually given a soccer ball and able to wail away at and be scored points as you kick the ball.
And you felt like you were in the stadium. There was a room there that you actually felt the sound and the feeling.
Yeah, so it was really trying to connect with all of the senses, the sound and the feel of that. And so we created this soccer kick environment where people could compete against each other to kick the ball. We also created an immersive photo op where it was a slow motion capture of what it was like if your team just won a major soccer sporting event where there was confetti falling all around, and it was a slow motion capture of that. And then we also created a very realistic looking locker room where there was a lot of real, soccer memorabilia that people could kind of get the feel of what it would be like to be in a locker room environment. And so the combination of the physicality and just the emotion and the confetti, and it just really created, gave that overall sense of that you were there. Versus just watching it on screen.
And is that what people want? We keep going back to what do people want? I mean, how do you know what people want?
I think what I'm finding is that, in the age of technology, we've grown so accustomed to just connecting with a screen and just being oversaturated with content and constantly being, having that tech-related connection. And what I'm starting to find is that people are, somewhat looking for a little bit more of an organic connection. Looking for some type of an authenticity, something that feels real. So obviously there might be tech integrations and ways that they can then share that experience on social media with their friends and family. But there's something about immersive experiences that people are really craving today, especially the younger generation. We're finding that the younger generation is not as concerned about the material side of having a big house with a ton of property. They'd rather have, a 500 square foot apartment and, have amazing experiences and travel the world with their friends.
And what are the things that are like hot right now that you have kind of off the shelf that you find are constantly asked for?
Sure. Yeah, I would say the number one thing is, creating these immersive photo experiences.
So photo booths and things like that are not going anywhere. However, fill in the blank.
Sure. It's not that, well, I would say, 4 or 5 years ago, it was, okay, we're bringing a photo booth to an event. What does it do? Does it create some type of really wacky photograph in some way? And now it's less about the technology that we're bringing to the event because people have a perfectly good photo booth in their hand, and being their phone. It's more about creating a space where an attendee and the people that they're with can put themselves in a really cool environment and create their own content. So for us as a company, it's been transformative because we've kind of been pushed into more of the fabrication space and the graphics space and somewhat out of the technology end of it, just in a sense that that's what people are looking for.
So give us an example of that. Like I know that at one of our BizBash shows a few years ago, you did carpool karaoke.
Sure.
And we brought an actual car in,
Yes.
and you were actually photographed in the car singing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so it's really about, just creating these cool spaces. It could be anything from, like you said, at the BizBash show, we brought a real Ferrari onto the trade show floor. Another year, we brought a film-accurate DeLorean time machine from Back to the Future that you could sit in the car and recreate the movie poster from Back to the Future, which kind of ties in a little bit of the nostalgic element that I'm sure we can talk about as well. Anything from just this past BizBash show, just something as simple as creating a really fun ball pit that people can dive into and feel like a kid again, where they can, splash around in a ball pit and have an interesting perspective photo created, and then wrapping that in really interesting graphics and, just obviously tying in the brands that we're working with.
Is an experience without the photo?
That's interesting. I would say it is to an extent, but to, now in the age of Instagram and the Instagrammable moment, people, it seems, are almost quantifying their experience based on the interaction that they get after the fact when they post that content on Instagram, and if you said to someone, come in and enjoy this experience, but you can't use your phone, you can't document it at all, I don't know that it would have the same impact for people, because now you're connecting with not just one person, you're connecting with their entire social entourage, and you're almost, you're creating the opportunity to give them this, where they can create an enviable experience,
So, what I've learned also that from the brand point of view, that the holy grail is still either the telephone number or the email.
Sure.
And so we are really doing a lot with that. I mean, that's kind of the secret reason why people want to do these activations.
Sure.
Too, right? Is that, or am I wrong?
No, we definitely, data capture in many ways is the return, on investment for some of these, for a lot of these experiences, because many times there's not a specific purchase that's being made at the event. So it's really about building up a database of contact information from attendees. And I would say that's definitely the main focus of a lot of those.
That's the ultimate reason. Now, I think it's going to get more important now with the regulations that are going on privacy and security.
For sure.
With the California regulations that I would assume in any type of small print in an activation, there is, I have permission to use your...
Yes.
And that's got to be key, correct?
Definitely, especially with the bigger brands that we're working with. One of the first questions is, what's the opportunity for some type of opt-in? Are we going to be able to use all of this, contact information that we've been assembling throughout this experience? So that's definitely a piece of the puzzle. But what we find is that it's very easy to make the data capture a piece of the experience. It could even be brand ambassadors that have a tablet that we quickly grab your information before you dive into the ball pit. So it's not that necessarily it's a difficult to capture that data. It's really more about getting people to engage, doing an activation at a large festival where there's a ton of sponsors. It's what's going to, differentiate you and make people want to spend their time at your experience versus someone else's.
Right. And also, I think, though, that data capture piece is going to become so much harder with the new regulations that are about to happen. So the activation may be here's the piece of candy to get the right name.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. One of the things that I've seen over the past few years is there used to be the opportunity, let's say it's a photo activation or creating video content, where attendees could actually log into their social media channels right through a kiosk that's at the event and post it directly to their Instagram or Facebook. And what we find now is that if given that opportunity, really no one chooses to go that path because of privacy. They don't want to give up their password or their information. So it's really more about send me the content and then let me decide how I want to post it to my social channels. People don't want to really be controlled. And now working with some of the social media platforms like a Facebook, Instagram, they actually limit a brand's ability to autofill a caption. They wouldn't want us to post someone's photo on Facebook and we write the caption. They want people to have total control over how that content is presented.
So your execution has had to have changed.
Definitely.
In terms of for these activations.
Yeah, because now if you don't have the control over how attendees are posting that content on social, there needs to be some way to incentivize them to, whether it's including a certain hashtag or saying something in their caption, because otherwise, there's been activations that we've done that people are posting a lot of content, but we can't really tell because they're not hashtagging it or, they're just sharing it in a private way. So there's been a lot of focus on how can we incentivize attendees to take this content and then share it in a way that can have more of a viral impact.
Do you see generational shifts or changes between the types of activations that you do for one type of event that's an older crowd versus a younger crowd? Have you
Absolutely.
Do you plan it? What are Simon's rules? What does Simon says?
Yeah,
what does Simon say?
One of the things that I always say is that, if given a blank slate, it can be very difficult to come up with an activation that would really connect without knowing a lot of these things, like what is the demographic that we're dealing with? What is the age range? What is the how much time do we have to actually connect with attendees? Are they just going to be running past us, or are they going to be hanging out in a room with us for 3 hours? So there's a lot of questions that I ask along those lines, and specifically asking about the age range of the demographic in many ways cancels out and adds, different options into the mix.
Okay, so let's go through some of the, so if it's a Gen Z, it's different than a millennial, which is different than a boomer.
Sure.
Right. So what are some of the characteristics of I guess the most common one are millennial at this point?
Yeah, definitely. And
what are the rules for millennials?
For millennials, I would say much more so than, like let's say the boomer generation. Millennials are really looking for an element of authenticity, of some of what we were talking about in terms of that organic connection, can really kind of see through the BS a little bit, in terms of if a company puts on this really amazing, looking experience, but they know that on the back end, these brands are not really all that great in terms of what they're doing in the community, in terms of how they're supporting the community. They can really see through that from an authenticity standpoint, and we'll kind of call BS on that. So I think brands really need to think about not just the flashiness of an experience, but how are they creating that element of authenticity? Is that they can create a moment where they can collaborate, with the millennial generation of how we can help improve and make the lives better of the people around us. So that's really what I'm seeing, is that shift towards creating something that's authentic versus something that's flashy, but is kind of a shell of something that's not so great.
Do boomers like to have fun too?
Absolutely.
And what do you do for my generation?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's sometimes that we'll suggest an activation like, hey, let's do this stage dive and let's create a photo activation where it looks like you're diving off the stage into the crowd. And sometimes clients have pushed back and said, well, I have a little bit of an older crowd. And then we have to show them some, some proof of activations that we've done that, I think regardless of age, people do like to have fun and enjoy.
What is the common denominator among everybody? Do you have sort of things that would cross all boundaries, or is it?
Yeah, I think some of those elements are connecting with things that from a comfort level. That's where I think some of the nostalgia comes into it.
Well, let's talk about nostalgia a little
Sure.
bit. Nostalgia has come up a lot in the last month or so in my conversations.
Sure.
That there is sort of a flight towards feeling like when you went back to summer camp and you want to get that feeling.
For sure.
Tell us about how you design experiences and how nostalgia fits in.
Well, what's interesting is that nostalgia is really different for everyone, depending on what generation you fit into. What's nostalgic for me is very different from what might be nostalgic for my parents. So you really have to look at the demographic that we're interacting with and figure out what's their comfort food. What's something that we can present to them that they would relate to. So something that's been really popular now for, let's say mid-30s and 40s, that demographic is, creating some of these retro throwback parties, these 90s themed, it might be a throwback to a grunge rock themed or a punk rock themed party, whereas obviously nostalgia for like the boomer generation might be a totally different element. But really across the board, it's about hitting the mark in a way where if someone's walking by an activation that we have set up, if there's something about it that jumps out to them, whether it's that the way a brand is presented or it's an activity or something that they might have done as a kid, there's an instant connection that's way deeper than what we're trying, what I'm saying? It brings up a lot of very instant memories and flashbacks, and creates, it kind of breaks the boundaries down a little bit and creates a little bit of an immediate connection.
Building a memorable experience for your guest means planning every detail right. Skipster is the guest management platform designed to help you create the perfect experience, from impressive online invitations to seamless check-in at the door. Get started at Skipster, spelled ZKIPSTER.com, for a free test event.
And your design experience to do this, you have to keep all this into consideration.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that we've talked about is that a lot of our clients are looking for, it has to be like it's never been done before. It's the newest, the latest, greatest technology.
I want something no one has ever done.
I want something that no one's ever done before.
Do you ever do something that no one's ever done?
I mean, it's really difficult to say that it's something that's never been done before. But sometimes, integrating some of these technologies that are so new and are not, household name technologies at this point. We'll sit down in meetings and clients are asking about things like augmented reality and virtual reality and 360 content and this and that. And some of these things are very cool, but for instance, let's just talk about like a 360 photo booth, for instance. You go into a 360 room where the camera is based in the middle and everyone is kind of around the camera, and it creates this panoramic content that you can post on Facebook and then look around inside the image on your phone as though you were there in that space. It's very cool, but it's a very kind of limited in terms of how that content can be viewed. So sometimes something that is that over the top and cool might not resonate as well as just a really nice still photograph in a very cool environment that someone can really easily share with their friends. They can print a picture of it. So that's what I'm saying, where sometimes the newest, the latest, and greatest isn't something that is going to hit the mark the way our clients think it will.
I notice you have a lot of tactile things that are participatory. We've looked at a lot of painting the wall together and things
Absolutely.
like that.
I've seen a huge push towards some of these more organic experiences where, let's say, it's creating a custom coloring wall, like an adult coloring book that 15 people can collaborate and color on this wall, versus it doesn't have any technology integration at all, but it gets a ton of interaction. And it also...
Why do you think, is it the nostalgia aspect of coloring books, or like what is the feel? We talk about feelings.
Sure.
How do we dig deeper to understand what is that feeling that we're trying to accomplish at an event?
I think it's a combination of, sometimes with something that's more organic, it leaves a little bit more room for people to kind of choose their own adventure a little bit and create some of their own, put some of their own emotion into it. Some of these, like a virtual reality experience that is very structured and you're a little bit more passive to it, you don't really have control over it, versus a coloring wall, which is completely your own expression. We're handing you a marker and you're going, it's very tactile, it's very organic, but at the same time, we're not telling you how to color or how to draw. And it's interesting to see the way people have interacted with some of that. We did an event at World Pride at the Barclays Center for one of our clients, Northwell Health, and we created this Pride-inspired mural that people could color together. And what we found that was interesting was people started writing in their names of themselves, their loved ones, when they had, how long they've been together, when they came out, and it just became not just a coloring wall, but kind of a testament to that movement in general. And because we provided that space for people to really express themselves how they saw fit, we were very surprised to see how it kind of went in a direction that we didn't expect.
Do you see people, I'm noticing at events now that people need permission to talk to each other and connect. And so these are basically tools to help people do that, because sometimes you'll go to an event and nobody will talk to each other.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you see that.
Yeah, it's definitely been a request from clients as of late to create kind of these networking type activations where it breaks barriers down. It's more collaborative. So I would say something like an adult coloring wall is definitely something that achieves that. And there's other elements that can create, a similar environment. We've done a lot of these team building type activations with clients, even on internal events, executive retreats. internal.
What kind of team building activations?
Sure.
When do you say that?
Yeah. So, just taking some of our clients, let's say it's an executive team of 40 to 50 people, and how can we kind of remove them from the day-to-day monotony of what they're doing and give them an opportunity to work together as a team. And clients will come to us and say, what are we going to do with them for 8 hours? And we've done a lot of different things. And one of the most fun things that we did recently was create a series of escape rooms where we paired teams up and they had to work together essentially to break out of that room. And the CEO of the company was able to monitor them and kind of talk to them over an intercom and give them clues. But it was really just interesting to see the way people would work together to kind of break out of that space. And it obviously required a lot of collaboration, and so there's a lot of different things that can be done to achieve that.
I want to flip a little bit back into the origination of these concepts. And your original business was more on the social side.
Sure.
And so how is it that all of a sudden this thing that people thought were not that critical become the most important part of a corporate event? Because people have been doing them on the social side for a while.
Absolutely.
Right? So tell us a little bit about how you started and about the social side and how you've evolved into sort of being the sweetheart of the big corporate world.
Sure. I appreciate that. Thank you. We started out really as a social event production company. My career started, I started out as a musician, as a drummer, and I was touring a lot with some different bands while trying to go to college at the same time. And the event world gave me the opportunity to kind of slow down from traveling and really still continue playing, but at the same time see what was going on firsthand at events. And I at the same time was going to school for marketing and advertising and had a lot of interest in brands and how the way things were presented. I also come from a family of artists, so I've always been drawn to the aesthetics and graphics and just the way things are presented.
So before you go into your story, what did you see as the drummer that wasn't working, that made you want to sort of make a change?
I felt that I was seeing a lot of the tail end of trends that had maybe been popular for 5 years. And it just seemed like there was a lot of new, whether it was technology or just trends happening, maybe even in the corporate world, that it seemed like could inject some new life into the events that I was at. I had a bird's eye view up at the front of some of these events and could see what was going on and just said to myself, I felt like I can, reinvent this a little bit.
And so what was the first thing that you did when you started jumping into this business? What was there was got to be that one motivational thing. That you did. So
one of the first idea that really came to me was I was seeing that it was popular for kids at bar and bat mitzvahs to play video games, and companies would bring in a bunch of these video game consoles and slap a few TVs on a table, and the kids would sit and play video games the same way they would at home. And to me, it was like, hey, here we are at this beautifully decorated event. And if kids are going to play video games, it's got to be done in a cooler way than this. So at the time, the video game Rock Band was popular, which was, a collaborative game where one person's holding the guitar, one person's playing the drums, one person's singing. And so what we did, one of the first ideas I had was to create more of a band environment stage, as though when you went up to play that video game, you were looking out at the party versus looking into a corner. And we would decorate that stage with real amplifiers and real road cases as though you were on a world tour. So now you're still playing the video game, but it's more of an experience and more of a presentation to the rest of the event. Like, hey, look at these kids up on the stage playing this video game, but they're there as though they were like performing at the party. So I started connecting with some of the entertainment companies that I was playing for and said, hey, I see you're doing it this way, but what if I could bring this to the table and we could do it a little differently?
And so how did that sort of progress into your starting your company?
So from there, I got the opportunity to, on a wholesale level, create some of these, whether it was a video gaming activity or a new way to do a photo favor, like a photo moment. And I mean, literally was producing the stuff with my friends and family out of my garage and just presenting it on a wholesale basis to some of the entertainment companies that I was performing for as a drummer. And as I started getting out there and actually doing this on events, I would make connections with venue managers and other event producers and planners, and some of them took notice of what we were doing and that it was a little new and different. And that was really the start of starting to get some of our own clients. And it got to the point where the garage wasn't big enough and there weren't enough friends, to work the events that we were getting. And I had to kind of make a push to actually, start hiring some help. And
So this was about how long ago?
this was 10 years ago.
10 years ago. But you were thinking about this earlier than that. But those 10-year-olds, those people that were 13 or 23, 24,
Yeah.
25 now.
Exactly.
So are you seeing this whole, I always say that the generations that are at the bar mitzvah age or even at the party age then are the biggest trend makers for what's going on today.
For sure.
And you're seeing that same behavior.
Absolutely. That's definitely been interesting to watch some of our clients grow from having done their bar bat mitzvah to now they're graduating from college and, getting jobs, and potentially even becoming clients on the corporate side. It's
Well, they're instilling the same thing into their events, it sounds like.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your familiarity with TikTok? Everybody says, oh, TikTok is all about these young kids. But when you look at TikTok, at the integration of music and video and participation, do you see that as a flash in the pan, or do you see that as sort of what, is that a
I
trend
think
that's coming?
Yeah, I think TikTok is the latest iteration of some of these other platforms that have existed as well. Things like Vine, as well as Musical.ly and some of these other platforms that have existed. But I think it is a very cool integration of creating these lip sync videos with music and effects and speed it up, slow it down, and it's been very cool. And we've had the opportunity to create some really fun, almost recording studio type environments at events where people can create that content and then share it on social. So I don't think it's something that is going anywhere overall, whether or not TikTok, becomes the darling of that industry, I guess remains to be seen.
Is it Betamax or is it VHS?
No, I definitely think the idea of that content creation and combining, music and visual effects, I think that's only going to continue to
It's
progress.
like an activation at home.
It definitely is.
In many ways, you're basically automating an activation.
Yeah,
For a lot of people.
it definitely is. It's very cool. I think posting to something like your Instagram story has become so much of people's daily lives. So this is an opportunity to create something that is, a little bit more fun and creative and just a little bit more self-expression than just, what you could do with your Instagram story.
But their new tools are going to influence what you do, I assume.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are they already doing that?
Yeah, for sure. They're, whether it's creating an activation that, mimics or leverages the tools of a platform like a TikTok, just the idea of our clients seeing that people are using those platforms and creating that content, they want to give people the opportunity to do the same in the context of their brand. And I think it's really exciting.
Do you, we had a conversation earlier about the idea that you think that themes are dead.
Yeah.
That theming is over. Elaborate on that a little bit and let everyone listen to see if there's some debate about that.
Yeah, and I guess it obviously depends on the type of event.
Yes.
But let's say even on the social side, what we're seeing is, when I first started my company 10 years ago, one of the first questions was, what is your theme? At a bar bat mitzvah, are you going to do a basketball theme? Are you going to do a baseball theme? Are you going to do a dance theme? Whatever that is. And then we would lean heavily into that, and a lot of the activities and decor would be tied in with that. And what we're seeing more now is that the younger generation is very in touch with, kind of almost the retail side and the authenticity of what brands look like and what their marketing looks like and what their brick and mortar stores look like. So now when we're producing a bar mitzvah, for a lot of these kids, it's about creating an environment like you just walked into the Nike store in the city, and they want a brand that relates to their name or their initials or something that has the feel of like a Nike or an Adidas. And it's not about just creating a theme specifically. It's more about we're actually effectively creating a brand for these events individually, to the point where we're creating a style guide where, okay, this is the main, logo lockup that we've created, and here's a color scheme, and here's some secondary logos and slogans. I mean, literally
even for
treating
kids' parties?
Yes, even for a one-day affair, we're creating a brand that is going to be like a one-night open and close, but it's a lot of the same elements that you would see brands, spend years creating that same content for a company.
Do these kids who have whatever party it is continue using those brand elements in many cases?
I mean, to a certain extent, sometimes we've set up like a
crazy.
custom website for a party, or we'll do, a really cool custom monogram that we've seen kids continue to use, whether it's on, thank you cards or, I guess embroidered on a jacket or something. But for the most part, it's really just for these one-time events.
But we're developing this whole group of people that think about brands as a 13-year-old.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. We sit down with our clients and we start talking about some of these things, like saying the word style guide and talking about logo lockups. And they, at first have no idea what we're talking about. But when we show them what that means to really treat their affair as though it's a brand and their child or their kids, as though it's this brand new, whether it's a fashion line or, that sort of thing. That's really what we see people gravitating towards. They want to walk into their party and it's an immersive space that, mimics a brand.
So this is really, so we talk about how the social planners and the corporate planners think they're in two different worlds. Mm-hmm. Are they really?
I don't think so. I think it's really a lot of the same with a different skin on it. And it's been fun for us because we're in both sides of it. We're involved in social, but we're also involved in the corporate side. We're able to borrow from both. Something that we might design and fabricate on a grand scale for a corporate event, we can then present in a scaled down way for a social event that is very different from, other elements that are going on in the industry.
So are we going back to where we started this podcast? That the feeling of whether it's a social event for kids or it's a big brand, they want the same thing.
I would agree with that.
So give us sort of, what does Simon say about the feeling that you try to get at the end of an event? Like, what is that? Let's dig deeper into that. Like, at the end of the day, when you think something's successful, what happens?
I think it's when I feel we've succeeded at an event, whether it be a social event, a corporate event, it's when attendees leave feeling, I guess you could say, enhanced or changed in a certain way, that they've learned something, or they feel in some way like they've gained something.
You see the aura of the people.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really fun to watch people not take themselves quite so seriously for a little while in many ways. To watch, and sometimes when we create these experiences at these very kind of, you could say, corporate rigid events where people have to take their suit jacket off and just let loose a little bit, it's really fun to see people just enjoy themselves and, leave feeling good. We just did an event yesterday for L'Oreal where we created this really fun remix DJ booth where for a hot second you jumped in there and pretended to be like a David Guetta style DJ with all the lighting effects and everything. And it was just amazing to watch people flock to that. And even if they didn't want to do it themselves, they wanted to take out their phone and document it to show it to other people. I think it's really just about creating good vibes, really.
So I guess we're all kids at heart.
I would say that. I would definitely agree with that.
So, okay, Simon, how could people get in touch with both of the elements of your company?
Absolutely. Yes. So the social side of our company is Simon Elliot Events, and people can reach us, definitely on Instagram is a great way to connect with us, just at Simon Elliot Events. Elliot is ELLIOT, so Simon Elliot Events. And then on the corporate side, it's Brand Activation Services. So they can check us out at basexp.com for experiential.
Right.
And at Brand Activation Services on Instagram.
And I believe that we're just beginning in this world. I mean, this is still an experimental phase of how people gather.
Absolutely. I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface. I look back at some of the really fun events that we've done this year and over the past few years, and I truly feel like we haven't even started. So I'm really excited to see where it goes.
That's a good place to actually begin. Thank you so much, Simon.
All right, we're back in our studio. David, part of the magic that Simon has figured out is how to create activations that people want to experience, that get people connecting and collaborating and sharing on social media. I just love the example of the kids playing video games, the bar mitzvah, and then he created an environment around it, right? So suddenly it's fun, and it's also creating a sense of place for people who are not playing the video games, and then expanding that into a term that I hadn't heard before, networking activations or team building activations. You explored that with him.
Yeah, it's also sort of similar. It's kind of has a cousin in the e-gaming world where people sit and watch people game all day long.
Right.
But they're
what are you doing while you're watching other people play video games?
Well, you're sitting there.
Yeah.
You're sitting there engaged in what they're doing, but it's kind of the same thing, the idea of taking it and making it into a broader spectacle.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. And I think that you see some of that in some of the activations that he does. And he also kind of is the secret sauce for a lot of agencies. They just call him, and he's the one that creates them because he's so hands-on. He's like a creative director on top of a builder.
Right. And has grown into that. It's like kind of you don't realize what you're doing until you're called on to do it. He mentioned fabrication wasn't originally part of the plan, but all of a sudden you find yourself fabricating things.
Yeah, absolutely. So Beth, what else is going on at BizBash?
Well, we are in the midst of a month of innovation. We released our list of the top 15 most innovative meetings, and this week we will introduce our class of this year's BizBash event innovators. And these are people who are pushing boundaries and thinking about engaging people at events in new ways. And they are so inspiring, and I can't wait for everyone to read all about them. So that's on bizbash.com and in your social feeds, everywhere you experience BizBash.
Fantastic. So before we end, we'd like to thank our team that helps us get this podcast out, including Claire Hoffman, who handles all of our editorial duties, Rebecca Pappas, who is in charge of our distribution, and also our producer, Dave Nelson. So thank you all. And what do we say, Beth?
Gather on.
Gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.